Today, we'll explore two terrifying cave diving stories that ended in disaster. An experienced Air Force rescue diver takes one fatal breath that costs him everything, and what happens when an experienced cave explorer survives alone for weeks in complete darkness. Please be warned. These stories contain disturbing content about real tragedies. When two brothers head out for a day of adventure and cave diving, the last thing on their minds is that one of them won't make it home. This is the heartbreaking story of what happened in Goss Canyon. Michael and Paul Hayden had been visiting an old, forgotten water well cave in Goss Canyon since they were kids. From the outside, it wasn't impressive. Just a small, dark opening about 3 feet by 4 feet near the town of La Crescenta, California. The way in started with a flat tunnel going back about 50 feet. Then you had to climb down a slanted hill for another 30 feet. After that, you reach the flooded pool section, only 150 feet from where you started. The cave had dry ledges and water pools that were 100 feet deep, sitting between old well shafts that went up to the surface. Paul had become an excellent scuba diver. He worked as an Air Force pararescue instructor for almost 15 years and was part of an elite rescue team. His teammates said he was careful, well-prepared, safe, and highly skilled. As a master sergeant in the Air Force, he had spent nearly 20 years helping and saving others. On September 17, 2000, Paul made plans to explore some tunnels and well shafts that were farther back in the cave. He was using his mounted GoPro camera as his light and had enough air in his tank to last 2 hours. Michael decided to stay in the main cave area to keep an eye on things. The brothers had worked out a simple way to stay in touch using a rope tied to a rock in the main cave. Michael would pull on the rope a couple of times to check if Paul was okay. Paul would then pull back twice to signal that everything was fine. At first, things were going smoothly. But after about 20 minutes, Michael pulled twice and waited for the usual reply. This time, nothing happened. He pulled again, but the rope felt tight and wouldn't move. His first thought was that Paul must be stuck somewhere. After just a few minutes of this, he had to leave the cave and get help. He knew his brother only had about 90 minutes of air left. Michael rushed through the doors of the Crescenta Valley Sheriff's Department, desperately asking for emergency help. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department and the Montrose Search and Rescue Team headed to the scene, along with the Los Angeles County Fire Department. As soon as they got to the cave, they went straight into the water to try to save Paul. This cave system was actually what was left of an old water well system built back in 1915. The well had been left alone and forgotten long ago, so now these caves and shafts were completely filled with water, and the air inside had been sitting still for decades. There were deep pools of water, and between these pools were tunnels completely filled with water. The original well shafts created small spaces, about 3 feet by 3 feet, where water could be reached. Those pipes had been taken out years ago. Now, dirt and rocks filled up the narrow pipe spaces above. Dead plants and other natural stuff released rotting gases down into the chamber below. After swimming through caves and tunnels in the front section, Paul finally reached one of these shafts. Inside, it was only 3 feet wide, which made it pretty cramped with his scuba tank strapped to his back. As he pointed his camera light upward, he could see something silvery and shiny reflecting at the top. It was the surface of an air pocket. Paul was a very skilled scuba diver, but he had never been trained or officially certified in cave diving. His family said he usually carried a lighter with him to test if the air in a pocket was safe to breathe before taking out his breathing regulator. But on this particular day, he didn't have one with him. His camera captures the exact moment when he came up into that pocket of gas. You can see the view looking up at the top of the shaft, lit up by his camera light. Then he takes out his regulator from his mouth and breathes in. The video then shows the wall of the shaft, and suddenly he's back underwater. He makes no move to put the regulator back in his mouth, which tells us he was completely knocked out instantly. Paul sinks right away to the bottom of the shaft and doesn't move again. It was only a few seconds from the moment he removed his regulator to when he went back underwater. So what exactly happened to Paul? Just one single breath of air that has more than 10% carbon dioxide in it will make you pass out immediately. This happens because of carbon dioxide poisoning. Normally, carbon dioxide makes up only about 0.4% of the air we breathe. When the air in our lungs sits next to our blood that's full of carbon dioxide, the CO2 quickly leaves the blood and goes into the air in our lungs. But when the carbon dioxide in the air we breathe is more than 100 times higher than what's in our blood, the CO2 will rapidly rush into our bloodstream instead. In less than 1 second, gases naturally move from where there's more of them to where there's less. Extremely high amounts of carbon dioxide in the blood causes acute respiratory acidosis. This means the blood becomes highly acidic and deadly. When you're in a tunnel filled with water and you lose consciousness, there's no coming back. The full tank of air that sank down with him was completely useless. He simply slipped under the water and died within just a minute or two. There was absolutely nothing anyone could have done at that point. His brother would have been pulling on the rope, getting no answer, but by then Paul was already gone. One choice ended the life of a man who had accomplished so much and had spent his career rescuing others when they were in danger. The problem is that cave diving is completely different. It's its own special category with extremely unique dangers and risks. Proper training, many hours of practice with expert guides, and official certification are absolutely necessary to understand all the different deadly risks that cave divers can face. Now let's move to our second tragedy. When 3 experienced cave divers head out for a simple 20-minute dive, the last thing on their minds is that one of them will disappear for weeks. This is the incredible story of what happened in South Africa's Sterkfontein caves. Nuno Gomes had been exploring the Sterkfontein cave system for months. This amazing cave in South Africa was famous for huge discoveries, including a 2.3-million-year-old skeleton. On September 29, 1984, he planned to set up a permanent rope line to help future divers. Peter Verhulsel and Malcolm Keeping would help him by feeding the rope from above and watching for safety. Nuno had done this exact same dive twice before. They swam 396 feet from the entrance through a tight squeeze to reach a small air pocket at the end of the main tunnel. The small room was only about 30 square feet. The men moved easily along the rope, passing dozens of small side tunnels, and finally came up in the air pocket one after the other. They had an exciting talk about how they might be the first humans to stand exactly where ancient people had been millions of years before. This was the last conversation the 3 men would ever have together. Something goes wrong. They started swimming back to the main lake area, following the rope through the shallow tunnel. As Nuno led the men out, he felt Malcolm tug on his fin. Malcolm pointed that Peter was no longer behind him. Nuno swam back and caught sight of Peter's flashlight down one of the side tunnels. Nuno signaled to Peter to follow him back to the rope, and they continued swimming. As they got close to the exit, Peter had disappeared again. This time, after a short look around, the 2 men exited the tunnel and came back up in the open lake room. There was no sign of him. Nuno and Malcolm turned around and went back into the tunnel along the rope. Over the next 4 hours, they searched back and forth along the path to try to find Peter. They had started stirring up the mud with their many trips, so they could see less and less each hour. Although they were worried, They were still confident that Peter was waiting in one of the many air pockets at the end of the side passages. After using all their air tanks, they called for help in the late afternoon. As the three men started their return trip, Peter was excited about what might be beyond the main path. When Nuno grabbed his fin to bring him back, he knew that was the right thing to do. But the pull was just too strong for Peter. As he passed tunnel after mysterious tunnel, he finally turned off again and quickly went down a new tunnel. The rock formations in these dark, water-filled caves made even simple paths seem like challenging mazes. Nothing looked familiar as Peter tried to return to the rope. Moving through the narrow tunnels disturbed the mud and made it hard to see. After trying many possible paths, he saw the shiny surface of water above him. He pushed up and found himself in an incredible small room that no one else had ever seen before. It was a huge relief to have the safety of air. He had tried everything he could in the water to find the rope, but now he needed to just stay put and wait for his friends to find him. He pointed his light into the water to signal to Nuno and Malcolm if they came into this section of the caves. The initial excitement started to wear off when no one came up from the small lake in front of him. He turned off his light to save the 30 minutes of battery power that was left. The general rule at that time was to sit tight when you have unlimited air. Peter knew that his fellow divers couldn't be too far away and were probably looking for him right then. After several hours had passed, he knew that a full rescue attempt would probably be happening. His excitement had worn off and left him completely exhausted. He finally fell asleep and lost all sense of time. When he woke up, he wouldn't know if 10 minutes had passed or 10 hours. He was sitting in complete darkness with only very limited knowledge of the cave. His light only had 1 hour total of battery life, and half of that was used during his first dive. So with no light, no food, and no way to tell time, Peter wasn't sure how long he might have to wait. He had plenty of air and drinking water, so the basic needs for life were there. It quickly occurred to him that at this point they might believe him to be drowned. It was a horrible problem. Waiting continued to be the only choice, trusting that they would continue searching until he was found. After that first night of searching, the police locked down the caves until they had finished their recovery mission. Since they had limited resources and were sure it was a mission to recover a body, they didn't come back for a week. The following weekend, they returned again. The police had not allowed any civilians to join their dive mission. Nuno couldn't stand that they hadn't asked for his help. At that point, Peter had been missing for 16 days. Even if he had found an air pocket, he would have died from the cold long ago. Little did anyone know that at that very moment, Peter was inside fighting for his life. He was hungry and in complete darkness. While his flashlight was working, he had noticed several passages that might lead to a dry exit. In complete darkness now, he followed a path nearly 120 feet away from the water's edge. It ended up being just a dead end, so Peter continued to stay by the water hoping for rescue. As time went on, he likely wrestled with his decision to leave the rope in the first place. Now he was too weak from lack of food and sitting alone in the dark for weeks. Studies have shown that people can see things that aren't there and start losing their minds after just hours of complete silence and no visual input. Peter had been surviving day after day in an unknown state of mind. His body was breaking down as his own muscle was being used to fuel his body. Starvation is traumatic all on its own, but combine that with no light, sound, and social interaction, and you can imagine the nightmare that Peter was suffering. He was probably sleeping most of the time because he had no food to fuel activity. The biology of his life was breaking down little by little. Peter was barely hanging on after starving for weeks and losing 44 pounds of body weight. The hopelessness is truly stunning. The police continued their weekend diving for 6 weeks and then finally called off the search with no result. At this point, they opened the dry caves again, but kept the water portions closed to divers. As soon as it was opened, local cave association volunteers started searching for a connection between the dry caves and the wet ones. Roger Ellis led this group, and Nuno joined them. After just a few hours of searching, a connection was found by Nuno himself. Other volunteers found a set of footprints that led to a dead end of rock. It was a completely unexpected finding. Roger Ellis came to a new water connection and was stopped short by what he saw. Laying next to the water was the thin body of Peter Verhulsel. He had not drowned after all. In fact, he lived for an astonishing 3 to 4 weeks. His facial hair had developed into a beard, and he had clearly lost more than 40 pounds. His air tank was nearly full, but it was completely banged up. As they looked at his situation, they saw a message written next to Peter's body. It simply said, "I love you, Cheryl and Ma." There's no way to know exactly what Peter suffered during that time, but he clearly fought to hang on to the very limits of the human body. Dozens of divers were all searching in this relatively small space, but he just had no way to signal the rescuers. One diver had come up in an opening just 100 feet from Peter's location. If he had yelled loudly enough, might they have been able to hear each other? The echoes of that question remain. If the dry caves had been left open, this search would have found a living Peter in just one day. Peter's autopsy showed that he had died of starvation after more than 3 weeks alone. This was a devastating realization for Nuno.